medical school background, and one that was not entirely celebrated by an enormous number of the progressives, because he was a product of Virginia when Virginia was far less inclusive. And so mix his medical background, which he evidenced complete incompetence around, with his experience as a governor and as a politician. And what you find is that we had some fairly austere conditions in Virginia. Those have been lifted. And as you know, across the country, California, the first state to go into full lockdown, just came off lockdown. We do have a couple of East Coast states, including the state of Maryland, that is not coming off lockdown until July the 1st. But we're seeing some of these things rolled back, and all of them allegedly because of progress being made on the distribution of medical countermeasures. The fact of the matter is, what we have is a world in which that story was supposed to only be relevant when we hit some magical number like 70%. The fact of the matter is 70% didn't come, and the magical numbers seem to be going down anyhow. So what we're seeing is a growing awareness that the easy wins that were, people who are willing to buy the mainstream narrative, those easy wins are done. And now it's the hard yards of trying to incentivize, to cajole, to coerce, to manipulate, to do all sorts of other things. But certainly our experience has been that the relatively large number of people who are willing to question is actually not just a good stable number, a good foundation number, but it's actually growing. I did a couple interviews recently where I have found that we're winning yards on the field, not losing yards on the field. And so we're actually doing pretty well. But do you want to add your thoughts about kind of what we're up against here?
Yeah, we're just trying to kind of, obviously do all we can, speak where we can, share what we know. David is brilliant, as we all know, at researching and finding all the latest information to share, which we're trying to do on, in person too, to kind of gather people together, because that has made a huge impact, just getting people, together. We've over here been, made to be isolated for a long time. So just those basic needs, or just getting together and sharing this kind of the information, and actually having people gather, so they don't feel alone and isolated. And then getting also, people just want some hope. They want to know what to do. They want to go steps forward. And so that's basically what we've been doing. And a lot of people have just been ignited by gathering, and also having the bonus, us coming and sharing, and communities are growing.
Quite a bit.
And we're doing a lot of workshops here in our home as well to gather people together, because we don't want to just educate on the latest things. We want to actually teach people how to live, like which we've been doing for years anyway. Like to fully live is our thing, and that's been a huge thing for people, because they want to keep the spark in their life, and learn more, and they want to understand, well, how did we get here? How do we get out of this? And how can they do it at a really personal level? Because obviously it starts with yourself. And also how to manage too. People have lost friends and loved ones and stuff, but they've also had, like, we've met you guys and many others through this. So it's just a different now circle of people. And just helping people reframe that, and look at that, and then kind of question, was it really a relationship? Was it a friendship to start with? And a lot of the people that we're meeting are really real, easy to get on with, easier than I probably have with many people that I've had as friends before, and things like that. So it's just, we're helping people put a different lens on a lot of things, but basically really helping them on a personal note, as well as sharing a lot of information, also being mindful of our well-being. And like you said, Denby, sometimes it can be a hard a hard slog, and just being discerning of some of our time and what we're doing with it, and things like that, to be most effective for us and for others.
Definitely. And finding our tribe too, as you say so beautifully, Kim. It's never been easier to find our tribe. And like, look at you, amazing people sitting here with me today. It's so blessed to connect with people that I've known for such a short amount of time, but who are just on the same heart wavelength, most definitely. And I mean, it seems like, well, in Australia here, at least anyway, we've, despite the fact that there are very few incidences of people contracting anything like very, vaguely like a pathogen, they're still rolling out all the jab protocols, etc. And you guys probably have the advantage in America, because I remember they've been there years ago, and you haven't just got the main stations, you've got like hundreds of alternative news platforms, so at least there's a more opportunity for other avenues of news to stream through, whereas here we've just got the four or five main channels and that's it, and they're all owned by the one big octopus. So it's a lot harder, and I think maybe because we're so isolated, as you know, Kim, as well, being this little big little island away from everybody, it's almost like they've just put this great big fence around us with warning signs, do not enter, and that's also psychologically everybody still is being that we don't realize that we're allowed to, like, this is why the work that you're doing is so important, because people need to realize that it's okay that they can be happy. Like, we don't have to just literally just lay down and die now straight away. Don't give up. I'm finding that with people too. It's just this sense of oppression that is just constantly building and accumulating in us and affecting us physically as well as mentally. So it's great to know that hopefully, I mean, I'm sure in America too, they're running out of fast food and all sorts of things to bribe people with, aren't they? I mean, and what else
had some interesting ideas, didn't they? I don't know how many donuts can go around.
Yeah, exactly. We haven't got much to offer here in Australia other than
I'll trade my life for a donut, not.
Exactly. Anyway, thanks, guys. Beautiful. I'll move on to Henna. What's happening for you in Spain, and also your home country of Finland, darling?
Yeah, so a lot. Well, just to give you a little bit of a background, Spain was one of the kind of harshest lockdowns in the world, with really super tight curfews and perimeter lockdowns where you're not allowed to move beyond a kilometer or 5 kilometers or whatever. And the whole country was divided into these kind of Hunger Games society zones, and every zone had its different restrictions, and it was just total madness. Everything was changing every 2 weeks. And it was actually the summer solstice of last year when they made masks mandatory everywhere at all times. And it's still going. So they actually officially removed the state of the alarm about a month ago and took away the curfews. So you can now travel after 11 p.m. But the masking still stands, and you're supposed to wear it even if you're by yourself in nature. The only exemption in the law is a medical exemption, but there's nothing else. So most people are wearing it. And what I've found is this kind of, that people are almost getting used to it and maybe even getting somehow addicted to it. This is something that I find that, when people who have anxiety, they feel better when they breathe into a paper bag. Because this, lack of oxygen creates kind of a sedated feeling. So honestly, what I'm observing is a lot of people are very comfortable with the mask already. Like, it's becoming a thing, and people are color coordinating it with their outfits. And that's sad for me to witness how normal it is just to wear a mask wherever you are. And then the ladies go to restaurants and they take the mask off, and there you reveal the red lips. So they put the full makeup on, and then it's like a clown show. But so there's reasons to this, obviously, why Spanish are like this, easily complying. And I see that one of the reasons is that, we had the history of the Franco times, and there is still remains of that police state mentality here. And one of the examples is, for instance, that you have to show your ID upon request wherever you are for whatever reason. Wow. And the people are used to this kind of control. Also, if you get a fine and you are a resident and you have a Spanish bank account, the government can actually go and take the money out of your account like a direct debit. Wow. So there's a lot less opportunities for people to defend themselves like that. So if you work hand to mouth, like most people do, even if they really didn't believe in any of this stuff, they're going to comply because they can't afford the fines, and they have been horrendous, And if you have one fine from, going against the COVID restrictions, then the next fine you will have the triple judgment or whatever. So it's always increasing. So the system is set up this way where the people are more in the claws of the state here. But still, beautiful things have happened. Like the Police for Freedom movement was born here, out of all places, which is amazing. So last autumn, some Spanish police came together and started this association, Policías por la Libertad. And then I got to know these people. And this February in Barcelona, we launched it into an international movement. And now we have Police for Freedom chapters in Australia, and we have in Finland, Sweden, Netherlands, Canada, France. And so it's constantly growing very fast. And people are very receptive to this because they're able to recognize that actually we need the police on our side, no matter how much trauma and distrust we have. You know, it is an absolute key to overcoming this tyranny is to have them stepping on the side of humanity. So that has been like a little bit of the journey. And also we do a lot of community work in terms of like the activism. We have our weekly events. So not only internationally, but also, you know, I do a lot of work just in our home community. So it's been a very busy year and a half here.
Very busy. Where do you find the time to sleep? It's amazing, all that, Henna. And I've spoken to Ed here, who's the Police for Freedom, heading up the Australian chapter here, and he had a great conversation. He was fantastic.
He's just brilliant. Yeah.
He is brilliant. Thank you for setting that up, because police, are human as well, you know, and they've got a job to do, and they're not all, like you can't. It's really challenging, isn't it, not to blanket everybody either by their it's almost like I don't even know how you'd explain it, David, but it's like work racism in a way, like, you know, being judged for your job and just everyone assuming that because you're a policeman or this or that you're going to be, you know, a bad guy, but it's not the case. How did that actually get instigated or pass through law in Spain without anybody putting their hand up and saying that's not cool, Henna? Did they just usher that in through Parliament and then mention it one day?
You mean the Police for Freedom thing, or which? No. What?
All the stuff that the mandates and the lockdown and everything that's happening in Spain, like, did they just? Yeah,
no, they created this thing called State of the Alarm, which is this fake, which is totally against the Constitution. So really, you should have officially state of siege in order to implement anything at all. But they fabricated this thing called the State of the Alarm. So there is an alarm now, and because of this, we can just override all of your rights and put in all these draconian measures. But that's how they did it. They declared this state, and then as a result, everyone went along. No, you know, nobody thought to question that. Wait a minute, isn't it supposed to be state of siege for you to be able to put in curfews and lockdowns and stuff like this?
Yeah, well, similar here in Australia, it's the state of emergency, they call it. And it's interesting that every time the date that it's about to expire just is, you know, a couple of days, the next lockdown or the next load of cases come in, and then suddenly it's like, oh no, we've got to extend the state of emergency, and then that's how it's a playbook, as you guys know. You can see how it's coming in. So we're in that phase right now here in Australia. It feels like a federal closing down of the whole country coming very soon. But yeah, thanks for sharing that, sweetheart. I'll move to you, Laura. What's happening in Montana, Northern America, for you?
Well, we have a red state, which is good. Our governor seems like a very decent person. We are in a small town kind of area, and we're paying off some land, and the people that are in that particular area and the landowner happen to be just very on top of what's going on in the world. Some of them actually are familiar with me and recognize me. I'm like, oh man, like I better not like leave the house looking like a scarecrow, because like I can't believe people recognize me in this town. They're like, oh, I follow your work and your videos, which are now non-existent. But you know, when you drive on certain roads in the area that we live, you'll see a lot of support for freedom and a lot of, posters saying, things about the Democrats and deep state kind of stuff. And that's very encouraging. Sometimes there'll be a person standing in town, holding a sign, trying to get people's attention about the BS that's going on. I am pretty buffered from what's going on in Montana, as far as like in the grocery stores and this and that. My husband mostly does the shopping. He knows that I'm not up for it. I got kicked off Alaska Airlines when they tried to double mask me. You're all frozen. I know my connection might not be very good. Can you hear me?
That's right.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So, I mean, I try and just be well behaved, like quote unquote. But when they tried to double mask me and they were just giving me a hard time, I kind of lost it. I wasn't derogatory. I wasn't violent. I wasn't evil. I was just, trying to point out the agenda. I'm like, come on, you guys, like, seriously. I couldn't be quiet. I just couldn't sit there and not be able to breathe, air. And a lot of it feels like, to me, the reason people are complying is because the ascension energies and the signals coming in and the light codes coming in are so strong that people are more afraid of the upgrades than they are probably of, I don't know. I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand. The fear of the virus, the fear of death is synonymous with the fear of transformation and the fear of a great awakening, because it shatters their sense of reality so much and what they've invested their lives in and what they thought was truth, to the point where I feel like they hide behind it in sort of this need to kind of like put the pause button on. Even though it's coming from a deep state agenda, I think a lot of people are just super confused, don't know what to do. They haven't gone down enough rabbit holes to be able to say, wait, this is BS. And, this is not the time on the planet right now to live in this level of fear. So a lot of people know it. A lot of people are standing up, and a lot of people are confused, but a lot of other people, a huge portion of the population, are absolutely all about it, to the point where they will enforce it on their friends. They will judge you and criticize you if you're not going along with it. They're supporting it like full throttle. They're all about it. They think the jab should be mandated. They agree with the lockdowns. They're not seeing anything. So the more confused people I feel, they're on the fence. They're open to awakening and seeing a much larger picture. They might be afraid of losing their job. You got kids, and you might live in a particular area you can't just easily move from. You got the pressure of friends and family. And so I just see a lot of different types of individuals, the super awake ones that are like, screw this, trying to be loving, forgiving, compassionate, and patient with this whole freaking process. And then the confused, sort of in the middle, don't know what to do, feel compromised with their livelihood, don't know what to think or believe, don't know who to trust. And then the ones that are just like, woo, let's obey and like do whatever they tell us. And if you don't agree, we're gonna, so not to be redundant or repeat myself, but not everybody's responding to this in the same way. So similar to what I notice when I go into town, when I do go into town, but for the most part, it's a very, very high vibe location. But I mean, you go in the grocery store and you just see your diehards. And like you said, when it becomes a fashion statement, and you just see people just out in nature, wearing a mask. I mean, I have to say, I feel real kind of sad, for them, because we really need to breathe in the breath of life. I mean, all the ascension codes and everything about our ability to advance right now is to be grounded, embodied, empowered, and to breathe deep, breathe the breath of life, ground with Mother Earth, unite with our fellow, humans. And they're literally creating a reversal with all the different potentials. And it has a lot to do with what's going on astrologically. So it's a time of speaking truth, so they censor and they muzzle. It's a time of unity consciousness. They're creating separation, divide, and conquer. So they're doing everything against the grain of what could potentially advance us. And that's the way the deep state always has been. They've been planning this for quite a long time. And I feel something is rising out of all this, and it's showing up in the power of the people, and people coming together, and people supporting one another and taking a stand. So I'm going to go on tour with Sasha Stone and just go to different locations for a little bit. I want to do more in our local community. We want to create a healing center or some sort of retreat place to just kind of gather together and have meetings. And because we're dealing with something that is going to get really freaky for the next couple of years, as we know. We don't know how many millions might end up dying, or how many children will be abandoned and not have parents anymore. The indoctrination is like unbelievable. So I don't like to energize that or assume that. I feel miracles are possible and things can get turned around. I always like to see things from the most positive perspective, but the heaviness that I feel every morning when I wake up, knowing what we're up against, I'm sure you all feel, and everybody who's listening feels, it's a lot to process and move through. But it's encouraging because sometimes, I'll pull up to a parking lot and you'll just see somebody, refusing to do something. Even though the masks aren't mandated, certain businesses are still requiring it. There's signs in front of doors, and there are people that don't want to lose their jobs. And even a restaurant that we're very familiar with, and we know the people that are working there, we walk in and it's like they don't even know us anymore. They're behind plexiglass with a mask on, being like, you can't enter without a mask. And it's like, Renee, hello, it's Laura and Kevin. Like, are you serious? And so we walk outside and Kevin just F this, and he's just like, and so I ended up sitting in the parking lot blasting music and just trying to be like high vibe, and just like, and all these masked zombies are just kind of walking around and they're like, who's this chick? And I'm just like, woo, whatever's on the radio, just like trying to just cut through the weirdness and awkwardness. But fortunately we're in a red state, and but I do meetings with my Cosmic Gaia subscribers, and I can't believe what's going on in like places like Hawaii and Norway, where, the two latest stories. And it's very interesting to hear what you guys have to say. But we're hoping, in these smaller towns to really build, a team, even with the local sheriffs, as long as, somebody's not a part of the deep agenda, because a lot of doctors and police officers are a part of deep state, or they participate in some of these like dark ritual type stuff. We're trying to build a team in this community that will hopefully spread out and branch out to people all over the country and the world. And we're just doing all we can on a local level to have a macro effect. It's the most difficult part for me is not so much what's going on in Montana. It's the fact that every single channel of mine has been shut down. I don't have an income anymore. I've got, kids, I've got, bills to pay, I've got land to pay off, and all these visions and dreams that I was able to fund and support, I can't right now. But I just am trying to kind of breathe through it and trust in the larger picture. But to me, the censorship has been the hardest. As far as Montana, it's pretty chill here, and we're in a nice sort of secluded location. We run into a few crazies and zombies here and there, but for the most part, it's like fist bumps, high fives, and hugs.
Nice. That's good.
Like,
that's
great.
The
The madness. Like, we could all be in agreement, just like, I didn't think it was going to get this bad. I've been warning people about New World Order and all kinds of stuff with a very, very positive message for the last decade. I have to admit, I find this incredibly shocking. And
and to
not like, I expected.
But when it actually happens, though. Sorry, Laura, when it actually happens, it's very different, as you guys all know as well, because I know David's been like planning for this and researching and studying this for decades, as Henna and Ilana as well. I've sort of been awake for a long time, but haven't been, active like this only in the last really 4 to 5 years. So, but when it's actually happening, it's just like this, again, we have our own sort of cognitive dissonance, don't we? Where we're just like, hang on a minute, is this actually happening? Like that when you see the dystopian landscape actually unfurling right in front of you, for example, when someone's saying put on 2 or 3 masks, or you can't go and do what is, God-given right to go down and do the shopping, or your best friend turns their back on you and you have this sort of moment where you just go, whoa, is this reality? Then that's like another layer of all of us having to process and digest that, and then keep moving forwards, because you guys know the timeline split, and they were splitting anyway before then, December 21st, and now we're really seeing who's on what side, and then even the people on either side, for not wanting to create separation or division, but there is kind of, those two variations. Then there's a splitting and division within each of those as well, of like, well, okay, well, I get this is happening, but how far am I prepared to go? And, what am I willing to sacrifice? And where is my line in the sand? Stop rubbing it out and keep putting it in the sand again. It's like stand strong in it. It's tricky. So Ilana, moving into that, thanks for sharing that, Laura. Ilana is in Israel. So we're going more to, if there's a country that has been moving through trauma and suffering, and that is pretty much the pulse point of the corruption that's going on right now. Can you share for us in as a delicate way as you possibly can, Ilana, what's happening for you personally and what's actually going on in Jerusalem?
Well, so, there's no short version. I'm trying to think of the most concentrated way to express what's happened since December 19th when they started this injection. And I really want to say to you, David, that I heard your call. It was in January. I heard you say, this is not a vaccine. And I was like, I hear you. I'm actually from Virginia, guys, by the way, way back when. But, and I wrote an article, and it's the only article that was published in this country that gave any risk benefit analysis. And the title of the article was, "This is not a vaccine." And it was fully sourced, and it was really inspired by that call. And I've never been able to call it, a vaccine since then. And so it's been such an intense process of what's been going on. It was that bolt upright. Oh my gosh, we were informed by our prime minister that we would all be vaccinated. We'd all be shot up by the end of March, and they made good on that as best they could. It was 250,000 people per day rushing. Literally, there were videos of people running to line up. Couldn't get it in fast enough. And then it slowed. That was in the first couple months, and then it slowed. And to catch up to today, then we went through the whole process of battling these past couple weeks and months to keep them from lowering the age to the 12 to 15-year-olds, which of course they're doing now. They didn't mandate it, at least that, right? But it's out of here. It's out of the data that came from here, which shows an absolute causal relationship between the shot and myocarditis. And not only that, it's actually extraordinary that they're allowing this into the kids at all, because even before that, they came out with another article that said a third of the kids already have herd immunity or have antibodies. And so there is not one single, the only reason they say is, well, because the natural infection is worse than the injection, which of course is so absurd. All of their own data. So it's at this point, when you want to talk about Israel and what's happening here, it is with such an extreme. And I sort of thought, so I kind of thought, okay, so here we are, chosen people again, and here we are leading the way out on this injection. So I kind of thought, great reset. It's a lot going on there. So I thought other countries would take the reins when it comes to other sort of dystopian, progress. But actually, since then, not only did it move down to the kids, not only do we see what happens here, we see it really, it's actually extraordinary, because it really has been this microcosm, and it goes out into the rest of the world. And I've been, yelling from the rooftops, green pass, this medical apartheid, this is tearing our tiny little country, our tiny little society apart. It's a rot from within. And what we see today, there's a couple things I want to say, but what we see today actually officially was the very last COVID measure was taken off. There's no more masks as of this day, just earlier, no more masks, no green pass. Hey, we get to, it's a fantastic, tiny little sale to the world. Look, we did it. We shot everybody up. We're all back to them. But it's really just psyops, right? Because all the underlying things that we were worried about are 100% still there. There's still all the guilt and the flying restrictions and the PCR tests and where can you go and where can't you go, and quarantine when you come back. But more than all of that is it not, and more than even the constant threat for the variant. There was a news item a couple of weeks ago about a potential Olympic variant. I thought that was hilarious. An Olympic variant. They're already worried about the Olympic variant. It's fantastic. It will literally, there's no end ever.
Is that coming from Greece, Ilana? The history of, is that coming from Greece?
No, I say I'm most worried about the Constantinople variant that could come any second. Keep careful about that. But what was it? Oh, but it's actually what's left behind is not only, of course, at any moment it could come back, but this rot between us. The first question, the divisions is exactly what you all were talking about, like how the people who we connect with, it's right in there, because what we're fighting for is so deep, it's so clear, it's so light and dark. So, but those divisions, those stay as well. But more than that, even in the especially you see it in the medical world. You know, I'll tell you a story. A very good friend of mine. This is like firsthand. She's this is a friend of mine for 20 years, is donating a kidney to another friend. And it's, you know, it's a year process of checks and this, it's a whole thing. So they're at the very end. And then the Ministry of Health wants to have them sit down and have a discussion with them separately. I guess, you know, you understand what you're doing. And so they ask the person who needs to receive the donor kidney, have you had the shot? And he says, no. And so they say, we're not going to give you the kidney.
Oh,
Literally threaten the guy. This is not unique. They did in the end. In the end, there was a whole entire thing that happened, and he, God willing, will still have the surgery. But you know, you not never beside the fact that that's the actual definition of coercion. I mean, you know, there it is. You know, Webster. Yeah, like that's the definition of coercion. But you can't pretend this is about saving lives when you're threatening a man who needs a kidney to live if he doesn't take the shot. So it all just really falls apart. So that's what's left, and that's what's here, and that's what's still, you know, on the streets. You know, and not to mention this cold that I can't kick, because honestly, every single time I sit in a room in a meeting of people, I'm like sick for days afterwards. I mean, there's a real concern of what's it's very clearly unfolding. And I want to say that in addition to the, you know, so what I was saying before was that I thought, okay, so here Israel took the lead as far as this injection. And, you know, there's, you know, you've got Canada, you've got Trudeau over there, who's like, he's like poster child for the Great Reset. He's like so creepy. But anyway, but I was just thought other countries would lead the way in other things. And then a couple of weeks ago, a news item came out that Israel is signed a deal to give, for the next 7 years, to give all of their non-classified government, army, all of our personal information, all our medical records, our pensions, every single financial thing you've ever done, every single thing about Israeli citizens, where 7 years to Google and Amazon.
wow.
For me, that was like,
Wow.
that was the second bolt upright moment, because that was, oh my God, we're really heading this whole thing out. Like this is really, we're really heading this whole thing out the whole way, because, you know, you could talk already about like the mind-blowing fact of, you know, testing on the Jews again in their homeland. And, you know, I had plenty to say about that for a few months, you know, but, you know, just putting on the side the potential harm that's going to become of this people, you know, this already pretty small people. But what was holy of holies is the IDF. You know, it's everybody's kid. I mean, it's literally the existence of Israel is completely dependent on it. Yeah. So the idea that we would put all our eggs in one basket when they were decentralized into dozens of different bits and, you know, places for every, it was so mind-blowing to me, and it made me understand that this is really where it's heading. And there's another news item which I need to, you know, next time we all meet, it's still developing, but it's actually real. We are really keep on coming out with all the dystopia. So, you know, stay tuned, because there's more to come, apparently.
A series of like part 3, 4, and 5. It's quite scary. And on that note, it's thanks for sharing that, Ilana, because we can sit here and sort of laugh and have, I think we're at the point, it's just like we're going a little bit insane because it is so crazy. We're not laughing at the situation, of course, and understand that people are living in terror and fear, and many are dying, and all sorts of, you know, the effects of psychological warfare that's having on people is horrendous. So, you know, when we're laughing and joking, we're not making fun of that in any shape or form. But it's safe to say that all of our countries, and just the small representation that we have here today, that there's most definitely the statistics for people who are actually following the narrative seem to be a lot lower than what the mainstream is actually saying. They don't actually have the backing, which is why they're resorting to all the bribery and corruption of like get some fast food, or I think win the lottery in America if you go and get your jab, etc. So there's these two very different stories that have been presented in each of our countries, and also within the communities. And people, we haven't got the numbers here, and yet we're being told in Australia that we do have the numbers, that the majority of people are supporting the government's agendas. Whereas when you talk to people in the street, it's just like, well, no, not at all. So there's so much fabrication, as you say. We're living in a psyop right now, and it's just it's crazy. It really is next level crazy. So even to try to wrap your head around that every moment is, it gets to the point of ridiculousness, and then you either laugh or you cry, don't you, at this point too. So thanks for sharing that, sweetheart. We're sending lots of love to you, and another conversation for another time, most definitely, about what's actually happening with the transmission of people who have had the jab and people who haven't. I don't actually think a lot of it's got to do with the actual variant or the pathogen spreading to people. I think it's got a lot more to do with the technology that's going into their bodies and the environmental toxicity and radiation and things like that, that's making everybody purge. Because, if you go, and I'll get David to explain this as well, how the hell do we get here, basically, and how do we make sure that we know as much as possible about that so we don't continue it into the future? Because do you mind if I just quickly add something from Finland? I forgot to say, and also for you, Ilana, that Israel isn't leading the way in all areas. Finland is being nominated like the transhumanistic, leader of the world. They've already officially stated that they will be developing 6G in Finland, but Finland is going to be that champion. And also they're already installing some kind of strange motion sensors on the city of Helsinki. And they're marketing it, saying that this is so we can track our tourism better and then offer, better services for them. So don't worry, we'll just be able to see exactly where everybody is walking. And, the city of Helsinki and the state of Finland officially signed up partnership with World Economic Forum in June 2020. And now this is where we're heading. So don't worry, Israel isn't the only country that is in this dystopian race.
We'll commiserate later.
That's astounding. And of course, 6G, 7G, 8G, on it goes. I mean, it's not ending in the 5G. Yeah. I know. Thanks, Henna, for sharing that. So, okay, David, you're on. How the heck did we get here? Some of the talks that you've been giving about the germ theory and all the history of the scientific model, etc. Can you condense that in a few minutes of sharing?
Let's test him.
Yeah. So I apologize in advance because I am going to have to jump to my show.
Yes.
But let me try to put kind of this group into context, because that way we're kind of all pulling our energies together. I've often pointed to the fact that what we're currently experiencing was officially put in motion in 1215, specifically in August of 1215. Yeah. Most people don't pay enough attention to the work of Pope Innocent III, who was responsible for one of the greatest hijacks, which polarized religion, which polarized humanity, which polarized an enormous number of groups. And not surprisingly, if you go back to 1215 and you look at the papal bull of August of 1215, you see all of the foundation stones cut for this very thing. Mm-hmm. That was when, for example, in the interest of creating the genocidal Children's Crusade, which was one of the most apocalyptic events in European history. And by the way, noteworthy that Anthony Fauci's school mascot is this particular Pope and his papal crusade. So the good news is he comes by it, honestly, literally flying the flag of this crusade over his high school. So just, when I talk about this as a long arc, it's a long arc, right? But what's important to understand is that when you send children to their death in the Children's Crusade, when you decide that it's appropriate under the name of religion to say that we're going to let the Jews borrow and sell on certain days, and we're going to let the Christians borrow and sell on certain days so that we can do each other's dirty work, which was part of what was done in 1215 in the papal bulls of 1215. We polarized the disparity of religions. We polarized and turned either into asymptomatic carriers of evil. Every single piece of the puzzle was laid down in August of 1215. And the reason why it's so important to look at that is because what also was laid down was the principle of eugenics, the principle that somehow or another humanity was about the management of the process of death, and that the business of economies was about controlling the mortal soul of those individuals. And what we've had over the last then 800 plus years is we've had the evolution of innovations, which have in fact derived their energy from the transparent currency of fear, the transparent currency of manipulation, and then the most egregious, which was to pit groups of people, communities of people, whether they be nation states, whether they be religions, whether they be ethnicities, pit them against each other so that we have this notion that we have within each and every person this mandate to judge and classify so that somebody is either for us or against us. And the most insidious innovation about this, and I pointed this out in a recent speech that I gave, was that after the Civil War, we realized here in the United States that the currency of death was one of the most lucrative businesses to be in. And it turns out that the business model of selling the fear of death has been, in fact, the most influential contributor to the GDP of this country and every other country. We have built an economy based where 28% of our current GDP globally among the developed world, 28% of our GDP is specifically denominated about the fear of death. That comes in the form of life insurance, that comes in the form of pensions, it comes in the form of superannuation, it comes in the form of all kinds of manipulations, which we are told is about preparing for a future. But the undercurrent of that future is make sure that you die fully loaded.
Yeah.
And that message, which is unfortunately the pathogen that is where we can then motivate people by saying that we will transact our living for a fear of dying, is the tool then that goes into all of the models about human behavior and pathogen spread and all of this pandemic nonsense. All of it comes out of a very fundamental paradox. And I try to remind people that we had the term asymptomatic carrier born of religions that promote the doctrine of original sin. We don't have the notion that people are born into a pure life experience. We have a notion in our Occidental societies that we are born into some fallen state. And ultimately, the notion, I mean, think about this, how ludicrous it is for the first time in humanity's history to quarantine a healthy population.
Yeah.
That only could be done when you have also drunk the Kool-Aid of believing that an infinite birth is somehow a broken, a broken reality. That somehow or another humanity is destined for this kind of plague-like existence where they're nothing but parasites on the face of the earth. The fact is that we have done a miserable job as humanity since the 1880s of confronting the fact that the opposite of eugenics was for we the people to overtly celebrate the perfection and the complexity and the wonder that it is to be human. And the opportunity that we have right now is to recognize that against the backdrop of the institutionalization of eugenics, which had its last nail in its last coffin in 1953, when we invented this illusion that life was a biochemical double helix, which is nothing but eugenics, nothing but bullshit. The minute we actually step into a recognition that impulse needs to be met by an emerging, embracing, loving analog humanity that says we are more than the molecules that build us. We are more than the energetics that animate us. We are more than the calories we consume or the BTUs that we use to animate our existence. The fact is that we as humans have failed humanity by not celebrating our best, our brightest, and our goodness. And if anything is emerging for me at this moment, it's to actually blow the lid off of this nonsense story of a broken humanity. and actually reclaim this beautiful, wonderful complexity that says we are in fact not the fallen state that was codified in 1215. We are a transcendent, wonderful, beautiful, complex, amazing analog system that is in fact fully equipped to build living on the principles of life, not the fear of death. And I think I just summarized 817 years of history in 6 minutes.
Excellent. Well done. That's going to be a record, David.
Yeah.
Sure. Little round of applause there, most definitely. I think when they created you, they not only broke the mold, but certainly the list that you ticked with that toilet roll of karmic duties to fulfill in this lifetime was just mammoth. So that's why I love speaking to you and listening to your podcasts and your seminars, because there's always something, as you said, Ilana, there's something that he drops in where you just makes your brain just go, woohoo, hang on a minute, and completely do an about face and see something from a different perspective. And I honor and thank you for that, because that gives so many people more things to go and research, and obviously to go to your website. Now I'll put all the details, because I know you guys have to run, in the description with this, but Fully Live World or fullylive.world. And to remind people that, that like the guilt that comes with that, of like, we're here, we're born in sin, and then we've got to pay penance for the rest of our life. And we forget that the gift that it actually is of being in this human suit for this short amount of however long that time is. And I think that's beautifully said when we remind people of that. And that's probably the best self-help advice really ever. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah. And with that, I apologize. We're going to have to jump to the show, but it is such Laura, Henna, and Ilana, such an honor to spend time with you. Denby, thank you for putting us together. And we will definitely be back in touch. And Ilana, we've got more stuff to do to light up the beauty of the rising star of Israel. There's a beautiful story there. And I look forward to reconnecting with all of you. So thanks. And we have to jump.
Yeah, all the best, everyone.
Thank you so much. Take care. We'll talk soon.
Okay, right, bye-bye.
Ciao. Okay, Henna, my darling, do you want to expand on that bomb that you just dropped about in your home country there as well? What you can speak about, because I know you did I watched that interview, I think it was Spotlight, just recently in Spain with that very interesting journalist. Can you sort of give us a little bit of a rundown on what that was about, and if what's been the response to that? Have you noticed any sort of repercussions?
That was an interview in Finland with the kind of the national broadcasting company of Finland. And it was very interesting because it basically framed the entire idea of human rights activists as terrorists. Yeah, right. So it's been hijacked now. Like, there's no longer activism. It's just conspiracy theorists and terrorists. And the way they were doing it was that they were going into people's Telegram channels, these journalists, with fake names, and they were taking comments completely out of context and then showing them on the screen. And they had also been trolling with, very hostile memes, and then screen grabbing those and saying, look, these guys are, they're anti-Semitic, or they're this or they're that. And they were just like forcefully creating a narrative where if you dare, to speak against your own state and criticize these measures that they have been doing, then you must be a domestic terrorist. And it was crazy. And what actually happened is that I was interviewed for this program for 40 minutes. And I agreed with the condition that I'm allowed to myself film the interview also. Mm-hmm. So what ended up happening is that they only took about 2 minutes of that interview into the show, because they couldn't use most of the material, because there was no way they could skew it up. So they just took the tiniest little thing, but then they framed it around this ridiculous context with all these, fake comments online, and this person is connected to Russian foreign ministry and they are like a spy, and like a total mad scenario. But it was just very interesting to experience it myself. Like, this is how they do this, and realizing that this is what media is for. I mean, I've known for like 15 years now already that that's what they do. But it was very interesting to experience it myself, like, how does this happen? But there's been no negative consequences for me because it was so easy to see through. And there are actually even like lawsuits coming out of that story because they violated every ethical principle of journalism possible by making that program and making such insane claims as well. They had, experts saying that all these, new, what is masquerading as medicine, these shots are all safe, and masks cause no harm. The tests work 100%. I mean, they were just lie after lie after lie with which they framed, our concerned statements that it's not going to do them any good. This is just further evidence for us that they are consciously in this agenda. So I'm not worried about that, like how the mainstream media is doing it, because the more we actually engage with them, the more we can expose them and show exactly how they work. And that's my experience. I've gotten a lot of people, contacting me and saying, wow, I never realized this is what they do. Or there was another case with a magazine as well where I was, and that was like the most, renowned magazine in Finland, like the Time magazine, which did a piece on me, a completely smear campaign as well. And so many journalists got in touch saying, I'm going to quit now, and saying, I will stop ordering this magazine. So it's actually working against them the more they do that, because people are not stupid. A lot of people are falling into this because of trauma-based mind control. But, the more obvious they make these smear campaigns, it's even penetrating through them.
Yeah. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, darling. It's just the more for us to be able to cope with it and to see the ludicrousness that keeps building is like when you see something that is just so crazy, try and see that as a positive, because it's confirmation that the darkness, the evil, the whatever you want to call it, is actually really, it's in its death throes. And Laura can speak to more about that energetically, what's going on for sure. But it's like they're just grasping at straws right now. So the more crazy and stupid and ridiculous they look, at some point, even the most common denominator in humanity is going to go, okay, even that makes me question, and I say that with love, of course, but it has to, unfortunately, the SHIT has to hit the fan in our own backyard before we'll actually step up and go, oh, wow, okay, this is actually happening. It's so easy for us to go, oh, that's happening over there, so we don't have to worry about that. Or that's a third world country, or that's just the way it's always been in Israel. It's got nothing to do with us. All those horrible stereotypical, conversations that people do have and that thread through the language of society across the world, and the energetics as well of that, is like, hang on a minute, what are we actually unconsciously, or have we been unconsciously participating to these belief systems? And then bang, it'll come up. As you guys know, the power of manifestation, straight away, we'll have enough collective thoughts, and then something will come up and more people will go, no, my line in the sand stops here now. So fascinating to watch. So that's how I get through my days, of just realizing that, when I get over the panic and I do all my grounding practices to calm down, then I go, this is actually a positive. I can turn this into a positive, because it's confirmation that they are just trying absolutely everything in the book, because the light, regardless of what they tell us and report us on the box, is actually rising and getting stronger. Yeah. Thanks, darling. Do you want to touch on that, Laura, as far as, the energetic of what you're seeing of humanity now? We're obviously going through, and both Ilana and Henna know this well, as of course with Henna, the shamanic training and history of the knowledge that you have there too, is, we're in a cycle that we need to go through, and this is a healing that needs to happen, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's been going for centuries and centuries. There's a purging and layers of purging that needs to happen. And that's what, to me, that's what healing is. It's like getting all the crap out and looking at it and dissecting that and going, well, how did I contribute to that happening and what's involved with that? And then we start the healing process. So from that perspective too, it's like, again, as I just said, it's the worse it gets. It's like, okay, well, that toxin was that deep in me. Wow. Okay. Bring that up, have a look at that. Note to self, don't do that again if I can possibly help it. So energetically, Laura, what are you seeing as, with all the knowledge that you have over the decades of work that you've been doing? How's humanity going in this ascension, on this ascension pathway, given all the stuff that's coming up on the 3D right now?
Right. Well, regardless of what we're seeing, it doesn't mean that's what is actually real, because what we're seeing is based in just the artificial and manipulation and things that go against nature and our own, soul growth and development that we can experience on a very personal and authentic level. You can't imprison a free mind. It's really our thoughts that imprison us. And so they only really have enslaved those that are complying and obedient and not wanting to question. When we start to move into higher dimensions and higher chakras, and that corresponds with higher earth energies and our ability to upgrade our DNA, the psychospiritual warfare is radically increased. And because of that, it can make people feel defeated, and it can also put those that are a little less conscious into a lot of fear when we're about to take that next step. So every time we're about to take that next step, or human consciousness is ready to take a big leap, either on a personal level or a collective level, some sort of event happens to try and derail us. And we have to kind of understand that that is the main sort of tactic for targeting, so that we give up, or we're exhausted, or we feel defeated, or we feel insecure, or we're not doing it right, or we're not doing good enough. And we have to just sort of understand that, yes, there's that self-accountability that we have to address, but so we're not in victim consciousness and like they're all doing it to us, but we have to kind of breathe through it and just, kind of understand that this is part of it. To be senior to lower entities, we have to move through their tactics. I mean, there's seals and fences in our DNA that we have to move through. There's gatekeepers. There's this veil and net that has been cast over humanity that for us to move through, we're going to face the gnarliest of it in the moment that we accept it. We can find ourselves pretty easily on the other side. And that, in fact, it impacts everything. It ripples out. It impacts the collective consciousness. It impacts everybody that we're around. It helps us to be in alignment with the truth frequency, with a miracle energy that reminds us that spirit holds dominion over physical matter. And you can have these authority figures telling us what to do and what to think, but they are so small in the scale of what's multidimensional, or in the full spectrum of frequency of what's multidimensional. It is on such a lower level. They can really only manipulate the soul matrix. The personality matrix, to keep us fully from the soul matrix. Most of us, though, live in the soul matrix. That's why we meet soulmates, we find soul family, or we have found our inner calling or mission, and we're living on a much deeper level. When you're in the personality sort of mind control matrix, you might be still eating at McDonald's and watching the television, or even a more conscious type might be so indoctrinated by the universities they went to that even if they understand energy medicine, and have learned valuable things, they're still going to go along with it because they haven't really broken out of what encases us in the net that creates a lot of division, conquer and divide, and a lot of false light. So a person who gets a lot of degrees and certificates, who might align with Black Lives Matter, and which is nothing wrong with that, but when it becomes something that becomes toxic, to the point where there's sort of a counter racism going on with this white privilege stuff, I won't even get into it. It's obvious it's a part of a greater narrative. There's a lot of movements that have been infiltrated that are preying on people's good intentions, but sometimes those good intentions collapse into this sort of negative ego and lack of awareness of what other people are doing for the sake of the human race, going down the rabbit holes, being willing to look at the darkest of stuff. And like one of you were mentioning, the term conspiracy theorist or terrorist, how many people have bought into that is shocking. You would think that a lot more people were standing up like, wait a second, my friend, that I grew up with, even though we don't see things the same way, she just got deplatformed. There's something seriously wrong here. All the censorship, doctors and experts and people that have gotten multiple PhDs from MIT, like Dr. Shiva, getting censored. I mean, if that's not enough of a thing to sound an alarm for somebody, I don't know what is. So you have your personality matrix that the mind control is really captured. And in this time of awakening, when a person can break through all that and see a much larger picture and actually see people for who they are, instead of slapping labels on them or assuming that they worship the tea guy, or because they're fighting for our freedoms. I mean, it gets lost in translation. It gets lost in the mix. If they can't break through that, if they can't break through what this agenda is trying to do to all of us, then okay, but we're going to break through. So there is major spiritual warfare going on, and it wants to defeat those that have something major to offer. The starseed missions, the truth tellers, the people that are living in high integrity, that have love and forgiveness and don't want separation, that, you know, won't judge you for what your beliefs are, but want to harmonize with you and understand you. You know, those that really have something to offer, you know, that are being kind of cast as and ostracized as the problem. You know, the great awakening has to happen with those that it's not happening to notice it and recognize something's majorly wrong here, so that they can move through those gatekeepers and they can say, wait a second, I've been under this spell, I've been under this trance. Well, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction and Jupiter being involved since 2020 shows this major growth period. You know, Pluto being all about death, rebirth, alchemy, and transformation is allowing us to move to this next level and bust through this psycho-spiritual warfare that has been happening for thousands of years. It's just gotten to such a high level that it's becoming so obvious to many that many have been able to awaken in the face of seeing the inconsistencies, the hypocrisies, and also listening to victims and really doing the research. So there has been, you know, a lot of individuals awakening, and all of us sort of combined do hold, you know, this override frequency to help the rest kind of activate. But if the willingness isn't there, if their minds are owned or controlled, this is where we have to, you know, really build a boundary, but not completely, you know, give up on them. So I was just talking about in the last interview, this sort of bifurcation taking place, but with a bridge between these separating timelines still existing, to where there's still contact, but there's greater boundaries. Like, we're not going to participate in this kind of system. We're going to build from the ground up, from a grassroots level, the kind of civilization and community that is the most high vibe and safe and nurturing to our children, that works with the abundance of the land, because the earth is holding these ascension codes, same with, you know, what's coming in from the 0 point unified field. And we just, you know, need to just do that. And we are doing that. And others, you know, have the choice to either say, wow, this is inspiring, I'm interested in this. And we hold the resources. I mean, we can only do so much with trying to awaken people. We can hold the resources, we can try and inspire people. And the only way we can really do that is to hold love, compassion, and forgiveness, and try and create conversations that, you know, might turn, you know, them around. And if that's impossible, again, a boundary. If there is some chance of being able to reach somebody, great, we'll know to go for it. If somebody's made a detrimental decision, like getting the, you know what, and you can't really do anything from that point forward, I think we need to help them to feel empowered with that decision and not in fear of how detrimental maybe that decision is, because spirit holds dominion over physical matter. And I feel that we're in times right now with the Venus transits and this being an ascension window period, with the 13th sign of Ophiuchus being activated in 2010, that we can actually nullify the mark of the beast and these dark technologies. And we have to kind of really like hold beyond faith, but really like embody it through holding the love that other people are losing connection with, holding that soul matrix that so many are separating from in favor of mind control and indoctrination, and sort of a false light persona that is infecting their ego and making them impossible, to the point where they're the ones that are unfriending. They're the ones that are deleting us. And the only reason maybe we would is because they're being toxic and difficult. It's not because they voted for Biden. I mean, people that are really of a loving nature are not that judgmental. So if we can't reach a place of, you know, accepting our differences and knowing that true oneness is diversity and harmony, you know, and coming together on the common thread of love, mutual respect, and integrity, then we have fallen into that pit. And it doesn't matter what you stand for. It doesn't matter what you voted for. It doesn't matter what your occupation is. Once you're down in that pit and you're being a toxic person, you've lost yourself. You've lost the next phase of human advancement, which is to move more into, you know, that space and be respectful, share information without shaming somebody for being stupid or a sheeple, you know, share, you know, information with, you know, respect for that person and where they're at in their journey. But of course, if they're not going to be responding very well, or assume that you're on the other side, or you're just some conspiracy theorist, we definitely, it's a time to create boundaries so that we can really live the life that we deserve. Because sometimes compassion and trying to help people can keep us really locked into something that hurts. And sometimes the hurt just continues day after day, to the point where one has to kind of break the ties and be like, all right, I'm going to go over here and build the heaven on earth that I know is available. You can come join me, as soon as you drop the toxic part of your nature.
Yeah.
Whatever you believe, whatever you think, that's another thing. Because I don't know where people have lost the ability to have differences of opinions and still hold love and respect. I mean, we're in an era right now, or a period right now in the last couple of years, where the most shocking thing that I'm seeing is the level of toxicity and hatred based on just having different thoughts or beliefs about what's going on in the world, or who you might support or not support. I mean, so maybe somebody didn't go down the rabbit holes. Maybe somebody, can't handle satanic, ritual abuse and the victim stories. And that's totally understandable. It's not for everybody to dive into that, but don't disrespect the people that are willing, don't throw them under the bus because they're willing to be an advocate for children who are victims of pedophilia. I mean, I'm just shocked. So anyway, on an astrological level, I could keep going on, but we're dealing with Saturn square Uranus. Saturn does not want us to have our freedoms. Uranus really represents liberation, sovereignty, and connection with our higher mind. Saturn in this lowest octave is tyranny, control, enslavement, and a squared aspect means friction. So in order for us to break the bonds of Saturn and the dark Saturn, we need to graduate to the higher octave of Saturn, which is self-mastery and becoming a teacher and a leader in our own right to help create structures and containers, which Saturn also represents because it rules the law of structure, that can house our sovereignty, that can house our multidimensional embodiments, so that we can change the structures of our physical reality to accommodate the fullness of all that we are, and remove ourselves from the structures that are limiting us, manipulating us, controlling us, and forcing people to compromise themselves and go against their better intuition to, do things that they know is not healthy in the long run, or for their children, just for the sake of having the paycheck or having your kid in school. It's like, we need to pull together and get out of this.
Yeah.
And to me, this is the big breakthrough. Oh my gosh, we are not dependent on the system. We have each other, and we have this earth, and we have 0 point source, God source, universe. We have the creative imagination. Let us embrace the God-given abilities that we're here to discover. And, we have to be pushed to the edge to recover them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of people are not kind of picking up on it. And I don't know, it's really distressing to see, but I know at the end of the day, like you said, the light is rising out of the crumbling cabal, and something beautiful is rising, and the people are standing up, and we can't be complacent. We can't expect somebody else to do it. And I just feel that strength rising more and more. And I love seeing what's been happening all over the world with groups of people coming together, Sacha Stone and his tour, and the protests in London that are peaceful, and people are laughing. They're playing music, and they're showing wonderful messages, but they're not angry, they're not hateful, and they're not toxic. They care. They care about our children. They care about the whole human race, and they're fighting on behalf of the ones that are asleep, that are treating them like shit. Shish kebab.
Yep. Shish kebab. Mic drop, Laura. Fantastic. Exactly. And at the same time, we've got in the spiritual healing esoteric community, we're purging so many different layers of consciousness, and definitely clearing the wounded healer consciousness, which you guys would all be able to relate to as well, especially Henna as well, with the work that you've done. Is like, we've got to work on ourselves, and this sense of the responsibility of fixing, of healing, of saving other people is actually not ours. It's not our choice. It's not our decision to make. It's the response, or our ability to respond to what is in that moment, and move from that as clear a loving, grounded space as we can, so we don't make sure that we're a part of perpetuating those patterns of obligation and soul transactions that are just keeping us, as you said so beautifully, Laura, stuck in all that SHIT. And able to move above it, and also just allow it to be there, to go, okay, well, that's there, and that's where that person's at that moment, and that's all part of their beautiful karmic journey, but I'm not going to make it mine. I think we're noticing social bullying on a global scale right now, aren't we? Of like, just because I believe something, therefore you have to do it to make me feel safe, and then which is just crazy, obviously. Ilana, I'll finish with you because I know it's getting late for you, sweetheart. Have you got what are your solutions with all that Laura and Henna have shared there, and what you're experiencing in Jerusalem there, and witnessing as part of the Rapé party as well? What's the solution, and what are the sort of things that you guys are working towards bit by bit to make a difference, or to maintain your sanity and your communal, your community there?
Well, I think there's so many things that can be done. I mean, right now that we have this, it is still summertime and the sun is shining and we have this little reprieve. And I think that this is the time to restock and recalibrate and really and take charge. I think that there's, personally here, I think that there's, the number one is do not comply. I think that's always the message. That's 100% the message. And it's about building communities. It's about meeting. One of the few things that we began doing here that nobody else was doing is meeting weekly in person, and see organically what is going to grow out, what gaps need to be filled in your own community. There's the very private, there's the grow garden. There's the make sure you've got water, access to clean water. There's the very smart, basic cover your behinds. And then there's the keep meeting and see what grows out of that. And I feel like in this little period of time where, at least here, because I assume everyone will, as summertime comes in, like there'll be a brief reprieve, it will come up for air. And this is the time to do everything, you always wanted to learn how to, I don't know, skin a cow, what I'm saying? Like, learn to sew, whatever it is. Now is the time. It's right now. It's all, the point is that there's no end to the needs that need to be filled. And it is about taking responsibility. It's about understanding, something that Laura said that remind me, it's either way, that this push, the extremity of everything that's happening, it's a push towards, all of a sudden you're allowed to say the word God, you're allowed to talk about spirituality where you weren't before. The point is that we're being pushed to places that we also have to understand that that there is no divine position of the people who have been in charge. These are not, this is, they saw an opportunity and they grabbed it. And likewise, from the other point of view, it's time for us to understand that we are the leaders now. It is our responsibility. It is every one of us has to take the responsibility to, read every label and make every single risk benefit analysis for yourself, for your children, for your communities. And it's that moving forward. And it's that, I think that the opportunity now is what's different. What I feel that I'm sure that many generations have stood on a crux of crises and felt nobody had ever been here before. But what I feel the opportunity is here now that never was before was that we have this ability to take it all together. Not just Mad Lib, put a different noun. Okay, it's the exact same algorithm, it's the exact same formula, but we're just switching bad guy and bad, whatever the thing is, the solution or the problem. But we have the opportunity to put all of the wisdom of old, now, and future, all of it together. Allopathic medicine is fantastic in an emergency. Great, love it, amazing. But it does, jack all for prevention and for chronic illness. And I use it as an example because that's exactly where you could weave everything together and exactly the sorts of things that we're talking about, which is these wisdoms of understanding the problem, of understanding that our words make a difference and that there's light to move towards and that we have an opportunity to see each other in a different way, that we can still have our shape, but we can work together in a way, everybody was always, okay, so nobody can have any shape. We've got to all be doing the same thing. No, we've got to all have our separate. But here's an opportunity to realize that we need to figure out how to choreograph with each other, because at the end of the day, this is the globe that we share. We are going to make choices that are going to differ. And it is absolutely in the coming together, whether it's in conflict or whether it's in, more pleasant and beautiful interactions, like that's where the learning process. And we keep, there's this idea, I feel like America has really kind of manufactured this idea. It's like, it's only about being happy. It's only about feeling good, but it's about all of it. It's about all of it. It's embracing all of those emotions as process. It's not an end. It's not just the end. It's also to be, David was saying earlier, like this idea of being so terrified. You live in constant fear because, it's endless. I think Corona really brought up how you can literally, when you start talking about this invisible kinds of things, you can never end with the, protocols you can take to try to save yourself. And even those protocols are danger in their own right. It will never end. At some point, you have to come full circle and take responsibility and accept the danger in life and move forward with the light. Everything is a check and balance, and it's take a step and measure, and wherever, and it's all of it. It's all of it. It's my personal responsibility. And it's also having some sort of faith that there's a process, that's beyond. And I really, out of learn to, change a tire, can, sprout. It's all those actual physical measures. But I just, the act of taking the responsibility for your life and understanding that whatever you believe in, even if it's something beyond or it's not, that you're still creating a vessel. And each step brings you to the next step and brings you to the next step. And if you are just, if you just honor an amount of, if you're a person, I think integrity means that I'm honest enough to recognize that the answer today might not be the answer tomorrow. And it's okay. And being willing to uproot yourself and do that hard, painful work. And you see those of us reaching, and it's like you said, Denby, and I really appreciate it because it's been, especially like in Israel, we've had such extreme sort of like, from one day to, it was really just like the next day, the news, nobody was expecting it. Nobody even in the actual Ministry of Health committee knew about that they were going to cancel the Green Pass. And it was really a painful, like it was so jarring. But and I don't even know what my point was, but that happens all the time. But I guess I'm allowed at 11 o'clock at night. but the point was that I don't know what the point was. But the overall experience of realizing that this is it. And at the end of the day, we're stuck here. We're stuck here together. I think that people can be so people look to leaders and then they're all good, and then they find some flaw and then, oh, we can't follow him anymore. We can't listen to her anymore, because she's flawed, lo behold. And I think that it's a matter of kind of growing up and maturing and realizing that every single one of us has, there's a skill to find within each other, within our communities, within our homes, to find the skills, to find where we're good, to engage with that, to recognize the flaws, and to try to circumvent them as much as you can, but to get it that there is no perfection. The good is with the bad everywhere and at all points. And I do think
the perfection, isn't it? That's the natural law. That's us embracing everything as equally as we possibly can and embodying change, which is the number one rule of life, is that everything changes. There is only one constant, and that is change. And we're being invited to get in flow with that and align with that, and not just on the physical level, but the mental, emotional, and spiritual level as well, which I think we can all agree, and I'm sure David and Kim would say as well, that hasn't really happened to this level of participation within humanity for centuries either. We might have had, just really advanced mentally, and then a few centuries of really advancing emotionally, or gone and swung backwards and forwards between the pendulum. But now we're being invited to unify all these four different main aspects of ourselves and be patient and loving and accepting with one another as well as we do that, because we've all got our own interpretation and experience of that. Now, beautifully said, Ilana. I know we'll start to wind it up because I know it's late for you. So thank you for sharing that. And fingers crossed that, I don't know what's happening with the elections in Israel, but fingers crossed that your party gets in. Okay. So sending lots of good vibes for that.
That's already happened. That's not, that's a done deal. There's already a different thing. That's
next time.
That's already, there's already a new political thing happening, but that's to be seen too. That'll be interesting.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, darling. Henna, do you want to share, just briefly your solutions? And I mean, most people watching know the amazing stuff that you're doing, but how do you want to wrap your corner of the globe up?
Yeah. Well, I see this all as a kind of a opportunity for a diagnosis, so like come to see what we've always had. What are the things in our society that haven't been working for a long time, in terms of how we're feeling, how we're suffocating our emotions, how most of us have been living in fear and terror already for decades. But these masks are just the merchandise or the manifestation of that fear that most people have already been holding within. And not to take it as something like now we are on the point of collapse, but okay, now we are actually coming to see everything. So to welcome that opportunity, because without the diagnosis, without the recognition, we cannot come to treat it or heal it. So, and not to say that we are to heal it, but all of us together to come to diagnose ourselves. Who are we to begin with? As beings, what is our purpose here? And to go into that deeper meaning of our existence here, and to find each other through that, and come to recognize the sacredness that is in all of us. And I think the beauty of this time is recognizing the alchemical processes that happen within us. So we don't have to build bridges, we can become the bridge. We can hold several different realities at the same time, and see that these don't necessarily cancel each other out, that we can talk to these people. Doesn't matter if you've had the jab or what. I can still recognize that you are a human being, and that you are as sacred as myself inside, and that we can attempt to have that dialogue. And I loved what both of you said, Ilana and Laura, about that, authenticity. We don't have to be perfect. And I think that is the remedy also for our time, is being real, just showing how you feel at this time, because we're headed towards transhumanism. So they are trying to mechanize us and put us in these boxes and make us, dehumanize us with these masks and these, social distances and everything. So what we can do is just to be as human as we possibly can, which I believe is the thing that really pierces through the most, more than any, piece of data or information or knowledge that we can share in terms of like proving the adverse reactions of these voodoo needles or whatever, that we can actually just be real and say, I don't feel well when I see the children wearing these masks. How do you feel about that? Just be vulnerable. That is where our true strength lies, is when we are raw, vulnerable, real. And that's, I feel, where we can have those points of connection, and where we can, become the bridge, is when we are real with ourselves. And then that gives the license for the other one also to be authentic.
That just warmed my heart when you said that, sweetheart. It's so beautiful, and it's so true, isn't it? To just go beyond the veil of the human that's standing in front of you and connect on the energetic with the heart, and really have that conversation. And they may walk away, or they might look at you like you're crazy or whatever, but at least you know that you've moved from that loving space, loving kindness and compassion. And that is so key, keeping the human in humanity, most definitely. And you're doing a beautiful job of that. Thank you, Henna, sweetheart. Laura, do you want to just share your short little solution? I mean, I know you've got plans to build a retreat, so the minute that I can get a big enough canoe, I'm coming over.
Oh, yes, please do. Yeah, as far as solutions, I mean, we just have to keep our creative energy like focused on what matters and engaged in what we want to see happen. It's very easy for us as humans to allow our creative energy to be infected, tampered with, overrun from projections, from narratives, from propaganda, from fear, from hopelessness, defeat. I mean, the spectrum's really wide. So a more awakened type that is, on a mission, I think the trap that one can fall into is, maybe a feeling of defeat, but I mean, that only lasts for a minute or two. And then we're like all on fire again, ready to just like kick ass. So there's no stopping the power of the human spirit. And once a person's on board with this greater calling and mission, there's nothing that can destroy it. There's no obstacle or barrier or censorship or anything that can really get in the way. And I know that, and I feel we've all lived lives that, you know, kind of prove this greater strength to regenerate, to bounce back, to feel stronger and better for, you know, some of the adverse experiences, finding the wisdom instead of the victimhood. And so, yeah, I'm just feeling and encouraging, you know, people to just, you know, stay focused on a creative project or an idea or an inspiration. And I know sometimes when a person's feeling kind of heavy with all the energies going on, it can, you know, create writer's block or like lack of inspiration or feeling of apathy. And one of my favorite quotes, let me read real quick, that I just posted, kind of addresses this. But it's like, you know, we got to sit in those spaces and allow them to run their course, because they're very temporary. There's no destination that is based in depression, fear, anger. Those are temporary states of mind, but we don't have to be discouraged when we fall into it. We need to leverage it. We need to work with it to understand it and what the messages are, because normally, you know, anything that creates a symptom on a physical, emotional, spiritual, or mental level has some sort of message for us. But if we're only in the sensation or feeling of it and we don't engage with it and understand it, then sometimes we wallow in it and we stagnate and we don't know how to get back out. So here's one of the quotes that I really like. There is no antidepressant that will cure a depression that is spiritually based. For the malaise doesn't originate from brain dysfunction, but from an accurate response to the desecration of life, and all that is sacred. David R. Hawkins from Power versus Force. And so I think it's really important that we feel into what we're processing and be as real with ourselves. And you guys have said such beautiful, incredible words about all that kind of stuff, that we just are really just real with the experience, that we find some kind of creative outlet for it. That doesn't always have to be in service to others. Maybe it's a painting that we draw. Maybe it's a poem we write for ourselves. Maybe, you know, and that doesn't mean it's service to self. I mean, I think there's a circulation between taking care of the self so that we can be in service to others. And we have to find that balance, or else we burn out. So I think and feel that when these sensations come up, anger, depression, frustration, that we take a pause, we enjoy the beauty of nature and all that surrounds us. We find something, you know, fun to do and creative to do to help us to recharge, and we keep our creative energy engaged so that whatever, we're not fear-based people, but whatever is going on outside, we don't hold the empathic overload of it, so that we can diffuse the overwhelm that our emotional bodies and nervous systems, you know, might take on. So I like to go into sort of a place of kind of insanity, and probably is reflected on Facebook with some of the music I play in the posts that I have. Like, but it's just kind of like, it helps me to reset, just to kind of go into the full zone and just the nothingness of it all, and just to be in the now and just be in the celebration and to like enjoy the things that we have. And be in gratitude. So yeah, I guess to me, that's kind of the solution, because it's an every moment kind of thing. We're creative beings. We're co-creating this experience. And the reason they have mind control is because if they own the mind, they own the creative energy, because the mind determines what one manifests. Mercury is the ruler, and it relates to the magician archetype. So we either create magic with our words and we manifest all sorts of cool things, or we let the mind be controlled and overtaken to the point where our creative energy is possessed and infiltrated by things that we consent to. The minute we say, no, I don't consent, and this is what I'm aligned with, and this is what I'm manifesting through the power of our words and our intent and our thoughts and all those kind of good things, we absolutely hold a higher frequency. And it, to me, is powerful enough to dismantle and neutralize dark weaponry and all the assaults and things that might kind of make us nervous.
You know, amen, sister. Most definitely. It's doing the love, whether it's and creating the love, whether it's knitting, as you said, Ilana, of like, or doing something that you haven't done for a long time or have always wanted to do, learning a new language, you know, going for a horse ride, writing a card to a friend and actually putting it in the snail mail and posting it to someone. So, you know, they actually get something in their hand that's got your loving handwriting and your energy in it, and, you know, put a little flower, I don't know, whatever, anything that we can do that can counteract and counterbalance the fear here, as you say, Laura, all of us have spoken about that, and just keep bringing in that vibration of love and connection and support for one another in any way we can. You're all amazing at doing what you're doing, and so grateful that you've made time, as well as for David and Kim, obviously, today. I'll put all your links to your websites and things down in the bottom of the description with this one, and a little blurb about each of one of you. And then we'll, this has been live on YouTube, so whoever's been watching today and wants to make comments, and hopefully we'll get to do this again. Thank you for watching, and please encourage you to reach out to these amazing women, and also David and Kim as well, and support the work that they're doing, and then also, you know, activate yourself. I want to call us truth terrorists, if anything. If we're going to be terrorists, let's be truth terrorists, okay? Love terrorists, let's bring it on.
We'll spell it T-A-R-A, terrorist.
That's a good one. Maybe we can work on that one. So
thank you so much, Denby, for this, and it's so great to meet you women. And
pleasure, absolute pleasure. So good night to the two of you, and have a beautiful afternoon, Laura. And yeah, I'll be in touch, and so much love to all of you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.